By the time American forces were island hopping across the Pacific in World War II, they had encountered something their doctrine wasn't fully prepared for. Japanese defensive networks. Cave systems. Pillboxes. Tunnel complexes dug so deep, so intricately, that artillery bombardments, even naval bombardments from offshore, couldn't neutralize them. Shells would land. The earth would shake. And then the defenders would emerge from their tunnels, intact and ready to fight. Conventional assault was costing lives at a staggering rate. The answer the U.S. Marines arrived at was the M2A1-7, a backpack-mounted flamethrower that became synonymous with the Pacific Campaign. And at Iwo Jima and Okinawa, these weapons became arguably the single most effective tool for maintaining forward momentum against fortified cave positions. Here's why. Artillery couldn't reach inside a cave. Grenades could only do so much in a complex tunnel network. But a flamethrower could project burning fuel into those spaces, and those same lethal dynamics from World War I applied here too. Heat. Oxygen depletion. Carbon monoxide. In an enclosed space, the results were catastrophic for defenders. U.S. Marine Corps after-action reports from Iwo Jima explicitly credit flamethrower teams for maintaining the momentum of advances that would have otherwise stalled, or collapsed entirely. These weren't easy missions. The men carrying those tanks were some of the most targeted soldiers on the battlefield. They moved forward anyway. The flamethrower carried forward into Vietnam, evolving technically from the M2-2 of World War II into the M9-7. And in Vietnam, the mission profile shifted. It was used less for direct bunker assault and more for vegetation clearance, burning away jungle cover to deny the enemy concealment. Suppression of fortified positions remained a role, but the terrain and the nature of guerrilla warfare created new problems. The weapon was heavy. The fuel tanks were vulnerable to small arms fire. And in dense jungle, the tactical scenarios that justified its use were becoming rarer. By the late 1970s, the United States had officially phased out man-portable flamethrower systems. After nearly 60 years of service, from the trenches of Ypres to the jungles of Southeast Asia, the era of the infantry flamethrower was over. Or was it? Because there's a legal dimension to this story that most people get completely wrong. People assume that flamethrowers are banned. Internationally prohibited. Relegated to history. But the actual legal reality is far more complicated, and in the United States specifically, far more surprising, than most people expect. So what does the law actually say? Let's clear this up definitively, because this is one of the most consistently misunderstood areas in the entire history of this weapon. There is no blanket international treaty that bans the use of flamethrowers against military targets. None. What does exist is Protocol 3 of the Convention on Certain Conventional Weapons, signed in 1980. And what Protocol 3 actually says is more targeted than a blanket ban. It prohibits the use of air-delivered incendiary weapons against civilian populations, and limits the use of incendiary weapons against military targets that are located within civilian concentrations. The United States is a party to the CCW. Flamethrowers are legal for military use under the laws of armed conflict, provided the use is not indiscriminate and does not cause unnecessary suffering to civilian populations. And here is where it gets truly surprising for most people. In the United States, under federal law, flamethrowers are not classified as firearms by the ATF. They are legal to own in the majority of U.S. states, though they are subject to local fire codes and municipal ordinances that vary significantly depending on where you live. A device that has terrified soldiers on 4 continents and shaped the outcome of island campaigns in the Pacific is technically legal for civilian ownership in most of America. Let that sit for a second. Now, before we close, we have to talk about the most persistent myth surrounding this weapon, one that Hollywood has repeated so many times it feels like established fact. You've seen it in dozens of war films. A soldier is carrying the flamethrower tank on his back. A bullet strikes it. And the whole thing goes up in a massive Hollywood fireball, taking out the soldier and everyone around him. It almost never happened that way. And here's the actual science of why. The propellant in a military flamethrower, the gas that actually forces the fuel out, was nitrogen. Nitrogen is inert. It doesn't burn. It doesn't explode. If a bullet punched through the propellant tank, you would get a fuel leak. You might get a fire if ignition conditions were right. But the explosive detonation that Hollywood loves? That requires a very specific, and unlikely, combination of pressure, oxygen, and ignition at exactly the right moment. The catastrophic explosion from a single bullet was far rarer than cinema suggests. In fact, the US military even experimented with an alternative design, the M2 lifebuoy, shaped like a donut to wrap around the operator's torso for better weight distribution. It was discarded not because of combat danger, but because it couldn't survive the humidity and conditions of tropical environments. Maintenance issues. Not explosions. The weapon's real horror was never the dramatic fireball. It was the quiet, suffocating, systematic work it did inside fortified spaces that no camera ever captured. From a German engineer's patent filed in 1901, to the caves of Iwo Jima, to the jungles of Vietnam, the flamethrower spent nearly a century reshaping how wars were fought, and how soldiers feared. And the darkest parts of its history aren't the flames you can see on film. They're the oxygen disappearing from a bunker. The operator walking forward knowing what his capture meant. The men on Iwo Jima who kept moving anyway. This is a weapon that reveals something uncomfortable about war itself, that the tools we invent to end conflict faster often create suffering we weren't fully prepared to reckon with. If this kind of deep dive into the weapons and tactics that shaped modern warfare is what you're here for, then the next video you need to watch is right here. We go just as deep, just as dark, and pull back the same curtain on history that most people never get to see. The story isn't over. Click and keep going.